really what we wanted to do today is have a little talk to you about yourselves, and we'd love you to introduce yourselves to the group and tell us a little bit about your work as personally. And then after that, we might go through a round of that first. And then after that, we're going to talk about the work that you're doing in the region, in your region, as regional coordinators. And, I might butt into the question every now and then too, because I think that what I'm really interested to hear is the intersections of that work that you're doing in those different regions and how we can all leverage some connections to do better across the board, achieve outcomes across the board. So we might start with you, Neha. Is that okay?
Good morning. Namaste. As Hari mentioned, I am working as the South Asia coordinator. I come from Delhi, which is quite a privileged city, but I'm not from there. I grew up in a small town in India and then moved around quite a bit. And I studied hydrology. I work at the intersection of water management, climate adaptation, livelihood issues, and all of the learnings that I did about doing differential analysis based on one's professionality, that's caste, class, and gender. Qualitative lessons came to me by starting working in the international development space with civil society organizations, and that's where a lot of my reflections today would come from. Just wanted to acknowledge that. And also, of course, all of the that period has been that I learned a lot from. Thank you.
Thanks, Neha. We might move over to you now, Hala. Is that okay?
Hi, I would like to work from Fiji. I'm from Fiji, and I'm also based out of Sula. A little bit about myself. I guess I grew up in Fiji. I grew up in the islands for quite a bit in my non-teens, and then moving into Suva. Have been in Suva all my life. I guess have career-wise been with the Fiji government in public policy with the Fiji government for quite a while. With different areas from trade international to foreign affairs, and initially with the innovation and national security and defense. Then I transitioned into development with a different program that has to do with private sector development. Before I provided the Global Group Institute on the climate phase of things. And that's when I made my way into, I guess, AWP in the last year. And it's been quite an interesting time for me having to reconnect with the Pacific, also my career. I think I was just mentioning this morning, I've always been out in the Pacific, but with the AWP I managed to stay in the Pacific and really connect with the work that's going on around. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks. Over to you, Laura.
Great. Good morning, everyone. My name is Laura. I am the Southeast Asia coordinator based in Phnom Penh. I have a background in international development. I worked in the development sector for a long time. Spent 5 or 6 years in East Africa. Before starting my PhD, I did an interdisciplinary PhD in international development, and moved to Cambodia in 2017 to do my fieldwork there on urban climate change adaptation. So I worked with a community of urban farmers who farmed wetlands outside of Phnom Penh. So that's sort of my water climate connection, and have been based in Phnom Penh now for 8 years. I've been in this role, regional coordinator for AWP, for about 2.5 years, first under phase 2 as the Mekong coordinator, and now on the phase 3 as the Southeast Asia coordinator. So I cover Indonesia now as well, in addition to the 4 Mekong countries.
We might stick with you just for the ease of microphone use. Yes. So Laura, can you tell us a little bit about the work that's going on in your region and how you see community-led and partnered outcomes being achieved?
Yeah, the Southeast Asia region, and I can see some of our partners that work in Southeast Asia, so they'll know better than me. But most of the work that we do in Southeast Asia is really government-led. So if we take community in its broadest sense, we work very closely with our partner governments in Southeast Asia. And that's contextually different in every country. But broadly speaking, we try and have a really also a strong relationship with the government, and we build from their own priorities that they've set in terms of their development objectives and commitments. And we try and find a way to integrate Australian expertise into their desired objectives. So it's really about, and my role specifically is really about trying to listen and understand about what's the objective, the aim, the goal that they're trying to achieve as the stakeholders responsible for development in that context. And then how do we bring in the strengths and the experiences that AWP can offer to support those goals. And I think that we can do something quite unique as AWP in bringing in Australian expertise, but building a team around that can, at its best, at its most powerful, building a team around that can bring the strengths of our Australian partners alongside some of the really great work that we do around Gen Z, around gender and social inclusion, and highlighting local experts as well as really critical members of the team to bridge between Australia and our in-country partners. So we can talk more about that, but I'll hand over to Alan. They have to add.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Laura. Just to build a bit on what Laura said, yes, in the Pacific, the approach is the same with in terms of engaging communities through governance, whether that's national government or provincial government, but it does start at government level. I guess if I may reflect back on something Sarah said earlier on the approach of AWP, a co-design process that we're taking now is really something that's building the trust and the ownership at that level for us out in the field to be able to do what we do. I'm not sure if it eases our work or if it makes it a bit more complex in terms of the consultation that goes around it with government and posts in Zuma, but it is ideal. It is what needs to be done to be able to get the local context and to really be able to work alongside governments, I guess, in the regions that we work with or in the Pacific or where I'm working in. So yeah, these little steps are really important if we're looking at medium and long term in building the work that AWP does in the region. And partners are quite important in that. This is the Pacific portfolio is sort of new in some ways. This is the first time I have a full-fledged Pacific program. As we're in the design phases, we're just going into activities. This is the same approach that we'll take in implementation as well. While we have our network, and it is part of my work, or a big part of my work in having to build the AWP network across the Pacific, it is important, I guess. I cannot always state the fact for our partners as well, to be able to have your own entry and access points. And I know you do in the previous work that you've done in the Pacific. It's just so important that we all have our access points in different water stakeholders from government background even to get the agencies on the ground and have a daily the water space in.
So picking up from what Ella said, I think the co-design process and having JETSI integration into the AWP programs, I think I find that to be very progressive and how great step ahead in terms of building that community networks forward. Um, in South Asia, as I perceive, similarly, governments lead all the programming in terms of water and climate, and a lot of progress has been made in terms of having adaptation plans in place and um, opening up the conversations around gender integration and social inclusion. Um, but there is, of course, always room for and scope for innovation. And there, I see that we have a very strong civil society network, as I mentioned earlier, but also a lot of upcoming youth-led networks and also entrepreneurial space, which is very vibrant, at least in India, um, which equally inform and guide and reflect a lot of national priorities. So when I see community of practice in South Asia, I see a lot of all of these actors together, um, coming together to inform and build the water and climate portfolios and programs forward.
I just wanted to add one more point about co-design and the co-design process, since we have partners in the room, is the importance of our AWP partners in that process of co-design. So Neha, Ala, and I are just three people covering many countries. So as you know, in that process, we will work with our AWP technical team, our program team, and the government to get our terms of reference or program to a certain point. But then we really rely on our partners to participate in that co-design process. So we all know that there's a lot of changes between our conceptualization of the piece of work that we're doing and then the actual delivery and implementation. So just to say that we really appreciate when our partners can work in a way that continues that process of co-design, of working with our partners in the region to figure out really what are their needs and what are the solutions that you can offer as experts and as members of diverse teams. So I think it's just important to say that we operate with co-design, but we also consider you to be partners in that ongoing process of co-designing out.
I just we are going to have a couple of minutes for questions at the end, but I just wanted to ask one more thing of all of you, which is that we're talking about this approach that the three of you seem to agree is the right approach, and we're heading in a direction that is important in terms of achieving outcomes for communities and for the regions that we're working in. So you mentioned, Laura, that it is at its best capable of achieving amazing results. However, there are some challenges associated in doing something different and using new approaches. So can you give us some insights around those challenges that you are identifying and how you're kind of grappling with those in your regions?
Thank you, Kali. And I guess from my end, the one thing that does come out in this whole approach of what we're doing is in the Pacific, the governments are really small. The capacity to engage is not always as probably as fast as we would like them to respond to. Um, However, this is, I guess, as we are designing and implementing, this is something that we should always be cognizant of. How can we work around this? I guess. Um, for the Pacific, a lot of our activities are in the design phase at the moment. Um, it's, I guess, for us at AWP and for our partners, just having that thought at the back of our heads in how we can help the process going forward, given the capacity to engage on the ground. That would probably take us two steps ahead of the process if we're constantly thinking about that and how to work around it, I guess. Another challenge I would see in the Pacific as well, due to relatively small sizes and geography, is vulnerability to climate change. I know this is something that we always talk about. That's always talk about at multilateral levels, at the global level, at different spaces. But it's reality on the ground in the Pacific. One of the countries that we currently work with is Vanuatu. They got hit with earthquake last December. To it's now May. They seem to still have challenge in engaging. There's no capacity to engage. It's just that resources. Once one there's natural disasters, related earthquake, related cyclone hits the ground in any of the Pacific countries, the likelihood of national resources and efforts being diverted to that one particular disaster is highly likely, and that leaves work on the ground in other areas a bit lagging behind a bit. I thought it was a few months and Vanuatu would be able to engage, but I transited through Vanuatu on my way to PNG last month. Um, did tell uh, the driver that was taking me to from the airport to my hotel to just do a bit of a drive around Port Vila to see the place and see what it was like. To my surprise, from the entire CBD, the whole length of Port Vila, which is the main business district, is still closed. It's so many months now, and yeah, the reality hit me on because we've sort of put that engagement on pause for now. And yes, this is really what happens on the ground. It's a few months, but the relatively small sizes of our countries in the Pacific and have the capacity to engage for governance is just not that. This is, I guess, this is just becoming realities on the ground in the Pacific. Um, it's not just in Vanuatu; it's across the Pacific when something like this hits, and yeah, it's it's something I guess even for me from the Pacific, just the drive around Port Vila really brought home to me the sense of how vulnerable Pacific countries are to climate change and how that fits into the work I do.
Firstly, solidarity or Hannah, I can if I imagine in such a difficult scenario. I think South Asia, it's quite diverse and different in terms of political economy contexts. India is very different than Nepal. At the moment, South Asia portfolio is relatively smaller, and Bangladesh or Sri Lanka are not a part, but they're equally challenging political economy geographies in terms of uh, quite complex political situations and uh, uh, existing scenarios. But if I can talk about Nepal, challenge is similar in terms of having to fight with natural disasters and a lot of the existing resources being diverted to just make those ends meet as opposed to having water and climate led portfolios and thinking and programs. And therefore, a lot of I would see it as hopeful. There's a lot of room for uh, mutual learning and collaboration and wouldn't call it capacity building, but more of seeing how to enhance coordinated mechanisms in the country and have all of these wonderful technical partners come in and work as allies to help the governments. In India also, again, like I said, it's so diverse. Some of the areas definitely need a lot more interventions. The mountainous geographies, for example, in Himalayas or the coastal areas, are certainly grappling more implications through climate change than the rest of the country. And that's where again it's it's a it would be creative. A lot more work can be done to enhance less of siloed approaches and more multidisciplinary approaches, more bottom-up approaches, and help the governments to come up with innovative frameworks to be able to deliver.
Did you want to add anything, Laura? Use we have time.
Yeah, maybe just quickly to add something a little bit different. But in terms of challenges, I think my experience in this role is that AWP operates differently than a lot of development partners. And so many of the government partners that I work with they're very comfortable, they're very familiar working with development partners. But AWP is just a little bit different in that we mobilize our Australian partners. And so this can create a little bit of a challenge in terms of figuring out that mutual understanding, how they operate, how we operate, and the tension between identifying resource gaps where they just need help from people to do the work that they need to do, and more of capacity or knowledge gaps where they really need a specific technical expertise. And so that takes a lot of time and talking and energy to figure out. But I think AWP can really thrive in that space where we can identify more than just a resource gap, more than just anybody to do the work, but a really kind of specialized team that can support the objectives that are identified. And I think a lot of that comes down to interpersonal relationships, which is really not easy, right? It's not, always the easiest thing to say, go and build a great interpersonal relationship with these individuals. It's a lot to ask, but I think that's when we really come into our own as a team. We're able to build those relationships, trusted, respected relationships, where we can authentically work as partners in the region. So it's we had a little chat on Friday to say what do we want out of this session, and see, I think you said what we want is to know that it's difficult, but it's worth it. And I think maybe I just want to take the opportunity to say that it's really challenging, but it's worth it when we get those relationships running and working together as trusted partners. It's really when AWP comes into its own.
Wonderful, thanks, Laura. Now we do have time for a couple of questions. So I am down with you, and I will run the microphone to whomever would like to ask a question.
Hello, nice to hear from three different reasons. The co-design and outcome focused and working with local people is very difficult. So I just want to hear from all of you or some of you, any challenge you faced and how overcome. You can give an example
I thank you for the question. I guess if I may just back on what I mentioned earlier in terms of the capacity of governments to engage. We at AWP with in terms of projects we run on a timeline, on quite a strict timeline, and but having to factor in that that co-design process with governments, with defect posts, that that sort of I guess an added complexity to the process in terms of the responses and the timelines to those responses from governments and from different posts in the different regions we work with. So that needs to be factored into, I guess, project timelines that we in the activities that we implement. So yeah, it's a challenge, but it's a challenge that we take on India as part of the process of having to build relationships and trust on the ground to be able to do the work we do in an impactful way, if I may. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, shall we take another question?
So my name is Giri Gatel. So I do a lot of work overseas, mostly in Asia, both in Southeast Asia and South Asia. But most of these works are more science technical related. But often, having said that, I have to work with local, very grassroots community sometimes for my data collection and things like that. So actually we have tried pretty much all of these areas, working on different aspects of climate and water. So, for example, in South Asia, I just visited Nepal and originally from Nepal. So, in the middle part of Nepal, just in the low deep of Himalayas, during the dry season, a lot of fire issues. So there are linkages of water and fire. It's very, very important engagement how to control, prevent fire. They don't have water. So sometimes the education and in what level of fire that we have to use water, all these things I saw. So this is something like more technical engagement is important same time. So this is something that I didn't do. My work is more on looking at climate mitigation, how trees in Himalayas and water in the high mountain system trap CO2. That's how I work it. But I was invited to give a talk in a workshop on fire and water management in the Himalayas. So that was something that we need to strongly engage with the community, together with the expert and the community. So this is one important aspect I noticed. So I also have been working on a little bit of very much importance that I have noticed, very local knowledge, getting more important to prevent the impact of climate. So this is something important to extract. Our University of Melbourne is now trying to set up engineering aspect of indigenous knowledge, how to use that technical aspect. So this is something like South Asia. So we can discuss more on when we come next few days. In terms of Southeast Asia, so I have recently had a very strong group of leaders meeting in Shanghai from Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos. All those people were there, and we had a good conversation about how to manage the impact that upstream Mekong to the cold downstream basin, making to climate issues. So I had 3 years ago I published a paper in Congress Lake that I had a project. So trying to look at the resilience aspect. And then the guy from holders of Asian community, what they call commission. So he was very interested to also similar kind of the technical aspect to address those workload. Myself, I worked a lot. Yeah. Yeah. So this is what my experience I'm telling about. That is to have focus on expertise with community.
Wonderful. Thank you, Giri. And I'm sorry to interrupt you. We're going to have so many opportunities to share these stories. I think they're so important to hear what each other are doing in our own work. I'd like to thank our panel members. Just to let you know, they're going to be with us over the next 3 days. So if you'd like to continue conversations with them, just find them because they will be around and they're really happy to chat to you about anything that you might like to continue in terms of conversation about their region, the work that's going on in their regions. So you could put your hands together for our panel members.